Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Shawn Brooks. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. This, too, was another episode where, again, I just kept building on show notes and just throwing more and more things together, and eventually I had to just hit record and just start rambling here, because if I don't, then I'll just never get this episode out. There's just so much going on, and I just find all of this just absolutely amazing. Endless angles to cover, lots of different random stuff taking place. Let me very quickly start with this. First of all, there will be a Substack on Sunday morning, 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Make sure and check that one out. The Internet of Everything is the title of that one. And yeah, it's frightening, but it is what is happening. And it's one of the things that I think, again, is just something that a number of people are probably talking about, but it's not getting a whole lot of attention. And I just wanted to kind of make some rather complicated things seem a little bit more simple, and just provide a little more food for thought, I think, on this ever-growing wall of transhumanism that, of course, is continuously being built around us and closing in over top of us, with, of course, many people not having a clue, which is sad, because they're participating in their own demise, and, of course, they don't even know it. But with Substack in mind also, bounce over to chemtrails.substack.com if you're interested, and check out our Michigan business friends' articles on the history of sex education. It really is, again, very frightening, as you might expect. It is and has been a plan, of course, that was well scripted for a very long time, well over, I would say, a century and a half at least. And this kind of degenerate information making its way into American schools and even university settings, and of course being normalized, in particular among minors and even kindergarten students, is an ever-present thing. And we're seeing numerous cultures, of course, and numerous sects of American culture adopt all of this as if it's completely normal and 100% fine. And of course it isn't. And they're also, of course, as far as the school systems are concerned, are hiring the very people who support these kinds of things. Certainly during the hijacking of the month of June, and all the other activities that are taking place regarding the whole pride nonsense. But either way, bounce over to chemtrails.substack.com and check that out too if you're interested. Lots of videos that she has there, lots of historic articles, pictures, charts, the whole thing. It really is very thorough and very well done. Let's see. With that said, let me mention this very quickly. I was listening to Dr. Dave Janda's radio show last Sunday, and he has a guy on who's arguably one of his better guests, right up there with Dr. Robin McCutcheon, of course, but I listen to his show periodically, and he has an individual on by the name of Commander Scott Snow. Scott Snow was a fighter pilot, and he's a former fighter pilot, and he also was a Top Gun instructor, if I'm not mistaken. Either way, he was asked the question as to whether or not he thought that the election was going to be taking place this coming November, and very quickly, his answer was no. He is under the belief, and certainly the wavelength of thought here, that there will not be an election, that it will be postponed in one form or fashion, that the enemy will have to do whatever they can to manufacture a false flag, whether that be an attack of some kind, an illness of some kind, a combination of both, whatever it may be. And that was really kind of the end of the conversation regarding that. He said, but, they'll postpone it, and they'll do whatever they can to keep Trump out of office and basically keep people from voting for Trump. And then, of course, what happens after that is anyone's guess, whether the Supreme Court gets involved or the military or whatever it may be. So with that said, and again, that was basically the end of the conversation regarding that particular topic, but I sat there and I thought about it for a while, and I thought to myself, okay, let's play this out a little bit more and let's analyze this a little bit more. First of all, postponing an election in the United States is, I believe, something that has not been done before. I could be wrong from a historic perspective, but that's my understanding. And whether that's true or not, and whether that's happened or not, is almost irrelevant. What we do know is that in modern time, that has not happened. We've had delayed elections, we've had numerous stolen elections, we've had the hanging chads in Florida from the Bush-Gore race and all of that fraud. And then, of course, the fraud of 2020. and the fraud of all of the years in between. And we're well aware of that. But let's play this out, let's play this scenario out a little bit more. I think this is interesting. If you implement something like a delayed election or a postponed election, whether it be days before, months before, or even the day of, what's already happening right now would indicate that something is being planned here by the bad guys, or even pushed forward by the good guys to force the hand of the bad guys, so to speak. One of the things that is happening is Donald Trump, in the past, of course, has always said, we need to vote on election day. It needs to be a national holiday. We need paper ballots. It needs to be counted that day. And that's the way that it needs to be. Now, we all know that he has said that time and time and time again. And that matters, and that's important that he's repeated that time and time and time again. What he's come out recently and said, and even Senator Rogers out of Arizona has put this on her X account, but it's Donald Trump basically saying, or getting out the message, that everybody needs to flood the vote as much as humanly possible, even during early voting. Again, the thing to keep in mind here, which is one of the things that seems to be absent with a number of people, certainly the mainstream media never gives him any credit for this, is the fact that he's the commander-in-chief and he has access to military individuals who know exactly what's going on. They are certainly surveilling the bad guys. They have to be. That's what Space Force was all about. And at the exact same time, he would be the person that would know what the bad guys had planned, while the good guys, of course, would do whatever they could to force the hand of the bad guy and get them to play a card faster, or in a particular scenario, or a certain timeline, so to speak, that would, again, force their hand and cause them to basically expel all of their ammunition. Again, this is Sun Tzu, The Art of War. With that said, again, I just don't think that we have had a delayed election. We've had delayed results, which of course were fraudulent, but at the exact same time, we haven't had an actual delayed election. This would be something that would piss off everybody, the left and the right. But again, let's run this out as best we can. At least this is how I had it in my head when I was thinking about it. If you ran out something like this, like a delayed election, the American people, as an entire populace, would have next to zero recourse. In fact, local government would have zero recourse. Now, this unfortunately is where local government would start to show their true colors, because the American citizens would start going after local politicians, city council members, mayors, city managers, you name it. Chamber of Commerce, county commissioners, pick one. Sheriff's office, all of it. You would have civil war-like conflict, certainly from an argumentative standpoint. But at the exact same time, what real recourse would the American people have when it came to forcing an election and actually restoring our ability to actually vote, if this were to actually be delayed for some false flag reason? The unfortunate aspect of it, too, is not just our own lack of control. We could shoot people and, I guess, force our way onto a Dominion machine, rather, and, start pressing buttons and assume like it mattered. But delaying an election and keeping American people from voting on election day or the days before would certainly create a high level of chaos in itself. Again, there are many avenues and wavelengths of thought on this, but it's the one thing that we just can't control. We aren't poll workers by and large. Which then brings into question, well, let's look at this multidimensionally. If such a thing were to happen, would that be sped up by the good guys in order to have that bad guy scenario play out, in order to bring in the military and bring in paper ballots? And have the military actually conduct the voting instead of the American citizens? Because again, it's not like this at every poll watching place, or voter registration poll worker place is what I'm trying to say. They're not all Democrats. I mean, many of them are conservatives. Many of them are very staunch patriots, and rightfully so. But at the exact same time, we know that the riffraff is typically on the left. And this past week, which was a boom week as far as the Q drops were concerned, I'll get into that in a minute, because there were 4 booms on an old post from June 3rd of 2018. And you can go back and look at that. It's a picture of an upside-down gun. In fact, I'll just mention it now. There were at least 4 booms this past week where you had Janet Yellen, Anthony Fauci, Merrick Garland, and Christopher Wray all testifying at the exact same time, by and large, within a day or two of one another. The upside-down gun signifies that Hunter Biden is on trial, of course, for his gun possession and money laundering and a number of other things, which, of course, now his laptop has been taken into consideration. And then the last line in that particular Q drop also said, blackout necessary. Well, earlier in the week, on Monday, or Monday or Tuesday, there was a massive blackout across multiple tech platforms and telecommunications platforms, all on the same day. I think it was all on June 4th. Not an accident. That had to be a very intentional on purpose. It was AT&T and Spectrum and Verizon, and I mean, you name it. It was almost all of them. So that was interesting. But at the exact same time, you had Christopher Wray specifically being asked questions about a stolen election or a election interference, quote unquote, on numerous angles. That he's afraid of people attacking poll places and violence breaking out and this, that, and the other. Again, I understand that that's a common conversation that would happen with numerous individuals, certainly around this time, not to mention Congress, I believe, is about to go into recess for the summer, which means they're trying to get all their talking points in with all these elected and selected individuals back and forth as much as humanly possible. And for their own constituents and their own voting purposes and their own elections, they want to get on the record as saying as much as they can to make themselves look as favorable as possible to the voter. At the exact same time, I still found Ray's comments about it to not be out of the ordinary, and I think even Garland was asked a few questions about voter interference and election interference, of course, related to Donald Trump, the trials, and all of that stuff. But at the exact same time, let's go back to actual voting day itself. This would be one of those things, like I said earlier, where you would have citizens just irate that they cannot vote. That again, if this were to actually happen, you would see local individuals in all of these states not know what the hell to do for the very first time. I mean, the COVID lie, yeah, sure, we got it. They all went along with that. But unfortunately, because the local politicians wouldn't have a single clue as to what to do, what would end up happening is they would completely default and completely submit to whatever the federal government told them. And it wouldn't matter what Fed it was. It could be a Fed on the left. It could be a Fed on the right. It wouldn't even matter. Any federal government employee or authority figure regarding what local politicians should do, regarding, again, voting and getting people to vote and, getting the elections back up again and getting voting day going again, if it were all delayed, the local politicians in any town, city, and certainly state across the nation would defer to the federal government. Look what they did with the COVID lie. Almost all of them bent the knee to the local health departments and the county health departments. Well, we're talking with our county health department, and we're talking with the governor and their medical staff and their task forces at the state level, and then, of course, the federal level and the CDC and the blah, blah, blah. If they did something like that, a COVID kind of panic thing, but just regarding actually us voting, I mean, you talk about massive chaos. That would be a very chaotic episode. And unfortunately, people would think that this was all normal. They would think that, this is a way to usher in a global government, or that this is a way for us to Again, listen to authority figures in Washington, and they're the ones who are directing everything, and they have our best interests at heart, and trust us, government is your friend kind of thing. At the exact same time, with every action is an equal and opposite reaction. There's no way that people would be able to take this or want to take such a fraud like that at all on any level. There are too many awake people now. Yes, there are endless people who are dead asleep on a variety of issues, but election integrity, quote unquote, is one of them that almost everybody's aware of. Yes, unfortunately, there are people who believe that Joe Biden is actually the president of the United States and that he actually won, which is why you have a segment of the population that is so uninterested and ill-informed that they're actually not even going to vote. I mean, these people are pathetic. But at the exact same time, a delayed election, you would think, would even cause more people to start to wake up and at the exact same time go out and actually vote again for the first time potentially, or re-up their interest in voting. If in fact the bad guys played this card, but the good guys used it against them. I mean, what's the, I know it's Sun Tzu, The Art of War, but there's also a form of martial arts where you use the individual's momentum against them. Is it Aikido? I think that's it. I think it's Aikido, where again, you're using their weight and their speed and their volume coming toward you, and you simply just use that against them. You move them out of the way, and you push them or guide them in another direction. You can see clearly what's coming as far as the good guys are concerned, but the bad guys are flailing about that they actually believe that just running at the good guy or running at the thing that they're trying to control full speed is the best way to handle the situation. And then you basically just, again, manipulate them. And you use that strategy against them ultimately. I think that if such a scenario were to take place, that would be the good guys' approach. They would use this as the opportunity for the justification for a full-blown election day holiday, one-day voting, no early voting anymore. Paper ballots, military runs it. That way you're not having some whack job leftist come up to you in the parking lot of your polling place and say, "Do you need help voting?" And then they hand you the stupid little, pamphlet that has nothing but leftist people to vote for on that piece of paper. I mean, that's what happens where I live, but either way, it would negate all of that. It would get all of those people out of the way because the military would be there, and the military would be looking at those people and saying, "Beat it. Get the hell out of here. We're in control of this. Either vote or get the hell out." I mean, that would be awesome. So again, I think this is a viable scenario because it's the one thing that the enemy hasn't done yet. Yes, they've stolen elections. Yes, they've gaslit everybody and psychologically inoculated everyone into actually thinking that there is no voter fraud and all votes are counted, and if you say otherwise, you're a conspiracy theorist and a lunatic, and Donald Trump really lost, and blah, blah, blah. I mean, they have those people pacified, but this is a strategy that the enemy hasn't played out yet. And if they did, I can see good guys using that against them. And I think that's a cool thing. So let's keep our eyes peeled on this because, again, there's a number of different things that are taking place right now that I think are interesting. And again, I'm just going to bring these up. This one in particular first, I don't even know if this is real or not, but it's been making the rounds. And it's that the Saudis, in an old contract with the U.S. government, have been using the United States dollar as their currency for gasoline. And that alleged contract is up on June 9th. This month, June 9th. And that they're not going to re-up that contract. If that's true, then that clearly means that Saudi oil is going to be run by some other form of currency, not the U.S. dollar, which means that oil or gas in the United States is going to skyrocket at the pump. So if I was people listening to this right now, I'd gas up. That's just me, but, assuming that that's real. The other thing which you may recall me saying a long time ago was that Airbnb, along with other companies, In particular, Airbnb was putting to all of their contracts now, they were putting in stipulations in terms of service that basically said that if there's ever a lockdown of any kind and you're staying in an Airbnb, regardless of what happens, the individual will either not be refunded who is visiting said house or said apartment or whatever, but you will be able to leave the location even if there is some kind of a government shutdown of some kind. So starting June 6th, which, as I'm recording this now, is today, this is now their policy for Airbnb. Again, you can take that with a grain of salt if you want. You can dismiss it. I find it interesting, certainly in this giant scheme of things that are currently going on right now. Let's see. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to mention all that right off the top. Again, there's a lot going on, and I don't think any of it's accidental. I think a lot of it is, of course, being rushed. A lot of it is certainly political from a normie standpoint. Again, you even had Senator Kennedy questioning Christopher Wray, if memory serves, about Jeffrey Epstein. This is not something that typically happens, but we also know it's an election year. And a lot of these individuals, again, want to be on the record as questioning a government official about, high-ranking pedophiles and child traffickers. Because, again, they want to be seen in the eyes of their constituents as being with it and knowing what's going on. I said Epstein in a hearing, so you can trust me because I'm going to keep saying it, and I'll say more once we come back from recess. And if you reelect me, well, I'll say even more after that. I mean, it's all a political game. It's all a back and forth, but there's also some really serious shit going on right now. It'll just be interesting, of course, to see what transpires. But regarding the election and a potential delayed election, again, I'm not trying to date fag or do any of that. I'm just trying to make people aware of what that might look like in your area. Because I think there would be sort of some continuity across the board regarding how everybody would react and what local politicians would be subjected to and who they would be listening to. And unfortunately, again, like I said, it opens up the potential for a lot of fraud. Unless, of course, like I said, the good guys know that this is part of the playbook and they know that this might be a potential scenario that the bad guys try to run with. So they have some kind of a countermeasure in place. That would be neat if that actually happened. Again, they're even ramping up the whole bird flu lie and all of that nonsense. And Peter McCullough isn't helping the situation either. I mean, he is just like, hey, look, the COVID shots don't work with some ages and blah, 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 when in fact, of course, they're not designed to work with anybody. They're designed to kill everybody who takes them. But even so, he's out there pushing the whole bird flu thing too. That we need to be careful and, bird flu's, it's killed some people, but I don't see it as being a huge threat, but even so, buy my products. I mean, I don't know. I don't think we need to spend a whole lot of time on that. But I do want to play this audio. This was from the old Scarf Queen herself, and I believe she was on CNN, if memory serves. And again, she's saying some ridiculous stuff regarding the whole bird flu nonsense, and we need to PCR test farm animals on a daily basis. She's lost her mind. Again, she's one of many who need to be hung by the neck until dead, and she would be easier, of course, because of her constant scarf wearing. With that said, give her a listen here in 3, 2, 1.
We're not testing to really see how many people have been exposed and got asymptomatically infected. We should be testing every cow weekly. You can do pooled PCR. We have the technology. The great thing about America is we're incredibly innovative. We have the ability to have these breakthroughs. We could be pool testing every dairy worker. I do believe that there's undetected cases in humans because we're once again only tracking people with symptoms. When we did that with COVID, the virus spread throughout the Northeast undetected because it took a long time to get to the vulnerable individuals. But in the meantime, thousands, hundreds of thousands of people were infected with asymptomatic or mild disease and never came to medical attention. We have to switch from symptoms to actually definitive laboratory testing.
Again, PCR tests for farm animals. And right when you thought the term asymptomatic wasn't going to return, well, she's brought it back now. And that, of course, is not a thing. There's no such thing as asymptomatic. You could be sick and not even know it. You could be ill and not have any symptoms of being ill. Psychological inoculation, ladies and gentlemen. This is the gaslighting. They need the fairy tale to continue to push their fairy tale lies. Without the fairy tale in place first, it becomes a little bit harder for people to actually absorb the lie. But you need to repeat the fairy tale on a constant basis, and then there will be people dumb enough who actually drink it in. All right, I know I'm bouncing around a little bit, but let me get back to some geopolitical stuff here just to kind of bring this to people's attention. Earlier this, it wasn't this month. It was Thursday, May 30th. The Supreme Court ruled that state-sponsored banks can be disbanded from the Federal Reserve System and issue their own currency. The ruling came down again on Thursday, May 30th. It says, mark this on your calendar as #EndTheFed Day. It says state-sponsored banks do not have to adhere to the Federal Reserve Charter. States can then acquire gold reserves for their state banks and disband from the Federal Reserve System. This is nice. This is good news. It says each state in the U.S. operates its own banking system, parallel to the Federal Reserve. While the Federal Reserve has inflicted severe pain locally and globally, the Supreme Court has upheld the state's right to maintain its own charter independent of the corporate federal system. So good news there. Again, you could probably expect gold and silver to increase in price. At this point, why not? There was also this story from notthebee.com. It was titled, 1 million people exited the United Methodist Church in a single day, and I can't imagine why. I think we can, and if you think it has anything to do with the gays and their acceptance of all of that, well, you would be correct. It says the UMC has been destroying its numbers by embracing LGBTQ plus affirming quote-unquote politics designed for inclusion quote-unquote. But it turns out that most gays don't want to go to church. It says conservatives who they have purposefully and actively alienated do not want to go to church either. Certainly the case with the United Methodist Church, anyway. It says United Methodism's largest overseas jurisdiction has voted to quit the denomination in response to the church's divorcing sex from marriage at its governing general conference earlier this month. It says the United Methodist Church in the Ivory Coast voted on May 28th to exit the denomination. In 2022, this conference reportedly had over 1.2 million members, so its departure means over 1/10 of the United Methodists, or United Methodism rather, has in one day left the denomination. An entire African nation has left the UMC because they couldn't hold off the liberals. They put up with a lot, and I mean a lot, but divorcing sex from marriage was a bridge too far. Later on, it goes on to say that American progressive Christians, quote-unquote, are pushing their Western sexual values on African churches, colonialization, and have alienated an entire continent of Christians. Methodism in Africa, it says, which outnumbers Methodists in the U.S. for the time being, is thriving. But now it will have to thrive away from the United Methodist Church and take the form of either independent Methodism or join the conservative global Methodist denomination. It says, in their efforts to be inclusive, the UMC has driven away now more than 20% of its members in the last few years. Yes, of course it has. Most churches have driven away endless people over the last 4 years. And again, it's because psychological inoculation. It's the exact same concept. It's being used in endless avenues of business, thought, private, public areas of whatever, whether it be worship or, again, corporations or government, you name it. Again, the medical industry, without a doubt, it's all tied together. I mean, this is the transhumanist agenda in a nutshell. You have individuals simply going along to get along, commonly referred to also as the lemmings or the normies. And these people are without thought. They simply get an email on their computer from somebody who's above them or higher up the chain than they are, and before you know it, they just agree with it. And then they push their agreement and their directive that they receive over an email onto all of those who attend whatever area they are in charge of, again, whether it be a doctor's office, a hospital, a church, a business, you name it, and then everybody just has to blindly go along with it, or you stop participating. And people are voting with their feet by leaving. This is the way that you change things. This is the way that you collapse this corrupt system. They're doing it in schools, of course, which I bring up all of the time. It's a perfect example. This is the most effective way to take back any kind of independence and any kind of control, is by walking away from this entire game. The game has been set up for everybody to lose, but you'll never lose if you don't even play. That actually brings me right into education stuff here, and this is a perfect example, again, of something that shouldn't have happened in the first place, but unfortunately this is what goes on when you play the game, although this is kind of a hidden victory to some extent also, because during the entire George Floyd nonsense, endless schools across the United States, certainly in the state of Virginia, were doing whatever they could to remove the names of historic figures, in particular Confederate soldiers, if you recall, from their schools. I mean, their schools were named after these individuals, and rightfully so. That's the history of our country. But eliminating the history of our country, renaming it, rewriting it, redefining it is, as we know, part of the Marxist, communist, Jewish lobby satanic agenda. That's the entire thing. So this, again, was from the National File earlier this week, and it was titled, "Rise Again, Confederate School Names Return to Virginia District." It says the school board in Shenandoah County, Virginia, voted last month by a 5-1 margin in favor of restoring the names of Confederate legends Stonewall Jackson, Robert E. Lee, and Turner Ashby to local schools, and now the names have been officially restored. Good. That's a good thing. They never should have been done away with. Again, hopefully, this was done through conservative school board members and local political officials who said, look, we can't let mob rule here. And that's a good thing. I mean, that's a good thing that they've retracted all of this and gone back to the way that it was. At the exact same time, this is something that the home learning and homeschooling family has nothing to do with. I mean, they are far removed from this. They're learning about actual Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson. They're learning about these real people. They're reading their books and books about them and actually listening to their speeches and reading their letters and getting into the minds of those individuals rather than just having their name plastered on the side of a school. I mean, there's real learning that takes place with these historic figures, not just the window dressing of, we can't get rid of a name and now we're bringing a name back and that matters. I mean, the irony is that if you were to actually walk within those schools, you'd probably not see a single book from Stonewall Jackson or any book about him, rather, let alone, again, letters that he wrote or his philosophies on a number of different things. Same way with Robert E. Lee. Again, these were great Americans who did amazing, amazing things, and they wanted peace and they didn't want war, but they were also forced into it, as we all know, by the banking cartel, and that's really what the entire Civil War was all about. But again, you're not going to get that lesson in an American K-12 school, I guarantee it. It's all about slavery. It was all about slavery. Freeing the slaves, as everybody would like to think. Not true. Okay. There was also this. This is from Red State. I found this fascinating. In fact, hell, shut them all down as far as I'm concerned. It was titled, "Academic Publisher Retracts Over 11,300 Papers and Shuts 19 Journals as It Is Overwhelmed by Fraud." It says, academic fraud is forcing Wiley, a major publisher of scientific journals, to close 19 journals after some were overwhelmed by industrial-scale research fraud. In the last 2 years, Wiley has retracted over 11,300 papers containing some fraudulent content. Academic publishing is a major industry for two reasons. The publishing industry generates about $30 billion in revenue, approximately 40% of which comes from within the United States. These publications don't make their money from advertisers. To have a research paper published in a top-tier journal will cost the research team several $1,000s. The money typically is an authorized expense, for the grant or contract the laboratory has received. Why, you might add, would anyone pay $12,000 to have their paper published in one of Nature's 156 titles? The way you win grants, acquire, and maintain academic tenure, and move from the underpaid gypsy status of a postdoctoral researcher is by publishing. It says here nearly all of the problems associated with academic publishing, fraudulent data, insipid and irrelevant subjects, and incoherent writing being top among them, stem from the role publishing in academic journals plays in scientific research. Paradoxically, the business model of academic journals is based on selling space to needy scientists. So there is a tension between academic integrity and the bottom line that technology, especially the emergence of large language models, has exacerbated. I would take it a step further, me personally, and I would say it's nepotistic also. These individuals become editors and members of the boards of these particular conferences and publication outlets in these journals, and at the exact same time, they only publish their friends' and colleagues' papers, or even their own family members' papers. And they'll say, well, is there a conflict of interest? And they'll say, no, there's no conflict of interest, when almost in many cases there certainly is. Now, yeah, I mean, I could spend all day talking about, of course, the fraudulent nature of the actual papers themselves based on things that aren't even real, like diversity, equity, and inclusion and all that nonsense. All of that's made up. But think about how many journals are out there in the ether regarding those subjects, along with all of the conflict resolution and violence prevention techniques that actually do not work, that I've proven on the record that do not work, and yet those continue to be published. Again, the entire thing is fraudulent. Shut them all down. They always have been. They've been there to be a backstop for anybody who wants to publish but also has a particular ideology that they want to reinforce and turn into granite so that it can't be changed, it can't be moved, and that it's constantly referenced as being sort of the be-all, end-all of the way that things are. The article wraps up here. I'm just kind of skipping to the end here. It says, while shutting down 19 journals is impressive, keep in mind that Wiley is the home to over 2,000 titles. The shuttered titles are all from Wiley's purchase of the Egyptian academic publisher. Yes, I wrote that. Hindawai. I'm saying that right? Probably not. It says all that means is that the fraud is more easily detectable in low-end journals. It says most of the articles involved aren't going to change the direction of science. They aren't falsification of cancer clinical trials that corrupt clinical practice. It says many of these articles will never be read or cited. They do the damage by giving cheaters and liars a path to promotion in scientific research. Exactly. It's just a line on a resume for someone. And then if somebody wants to go and look it up and read it, they might. Many don't. But there are some who do, just to kind of get in the head of the author and again see if they have a particular ideology or a bend in a particular way. But even so, it doesn't mean that the fraud is going to stop. It certainly won't. It goes on here and wraps up. It says, while articles in scientific journals are supposed to disseminate scientific information, it has devolved into self-promotion. Scientific publishing is how scientists let their peer group know how brilliant they are. It has also become a proxy for productivity. The more papers you are listed as an author on, the better your chances of advancement. While the first and last authors on a paper are the most important, buying your way in as a fourth or fifth author does have value. Yeah, because it's just a line on a resume. It wraps up here and it says, none of this could exist without the current publish or perish system. And if there were concrete career-ending consequences for publishing false research results or participating in a paper mill scam. It says the next time someone tells you to quote-unquote trust the science, just remember that you are being asked to rely upon a deeply corrupted system that hosts a lot of people who are much more interested in moving their careers forward than in the cause of science, unquote. That's well said. That's a nice summary of how that entire thing operates, and it does operate quite like that. There is also this story finally in education, rather sad and highly suspicious. And I know this individual, not personally, but I have seen them before numerous times on the Stu Peters show, if I'm not mistaken. This is, again, highly suspicious. This is from the Daily Mail on June 5th. It was titled Conservative Dad Who Launched War on Maine School Districts Over Transgender Bathroom Policies, CRT Lessons, and LGBT Books Kills Himself, aged 53. This is Shawn McBreairty, 53 years old, made a name for himself in 2021 after he appeared on Tucker Carlson's now defunct Fox News show and claimed he would not be allowed at his twins' daughter's graduation over his opposition to the district's teaching on race. McBreairty, who called himself America's most dangerous dad, has been banned from the properties of Cumberland, Maine's School Administrative District 51 after he padlocked a billboard to a school fence demanding Superintendent Jeff Porter be fired. Friends of the activist and his wife Patty have been posting their condolences on social media, with several local news outlets reporting that McBreairty died on Monday. The details of his death remain unclear. He was being sued. He was suing other school districts also. There was a school teacher that he was suing, I believe, who was also countersuing him. Again, a lot of back and forth in the whole lawsuit game. I don't know if he actually took his own life. I have no proof of it otherwise outside of this particular headline. What I know is this. I know that the school system can have people killed. This is something that happens. They're tied in with unions, after all, and unions have people killed all of the time. With that said, I also know the mental and emotional drain and impact that engaging in lawsuits and working with lawyers and defending yourself and even going on the offensive can have on the human mind. It is taxing, and that is putting it mildly. And unfortunately, it's also remarkably expensive. Again, this individual has passed away clearly for one reason or another due to one thing or another, but even so, they should be applauded for their efforts. And I would even say this, and this is again kind of the unfortunate part, and I don't mean any disrespect, I'm simply just providing my opinion on the issue here, that unfortunately when an individual becomes uninvolved with a school system, for example, in their particular case where their daughters, his daughters, certainly, and his wife's had graduated already, he continues to sort of take up the fight and go after these school districts, even though he has really no stake in the game. He has no children in the system. It's not like he's trying to defend his own. He's clearly trying to defend, and was trying to defend, the actions of other parents who were trying to seek out the right thing to do, and the children who were still attending those school districts. Of course, putting all the pornographic books in the libraries and trying to get rid of those, I'm sure, and 1,000 other things that he was doing. But, you know, this is one of the avenues where if an individual doesn't know who they're up against, then you don't know what's going to come back your way. This is one of the reasons why, of course, you never see me on stages touring the country or even taking up lawsuits against individuals. You know, there are numerous, having been in the business, I'll put it this way, having been in the business, I know for a fact that there are other ways to get things done. There are cleaner ways to get things done that are far cheaper than lawsuits, and there are dirtier ways to get things done that also don't involve lawsuits. Sometimes all you have to do is just say the word allegedly a whole lot. Sometimes you can blackmail individuals. Sometimes you can threaten individuals. Sometimes you can do it publicly. You can do it privately. In particular, when you have the facts on your side. And there's a number of methods to use to get rid of very bad people. At the exact same time, a person does have to pick their battles. And you do have to understand that this education system does kill people. This, again, is something that is hard for people to grasp. That, again, they can make anything look like a suicide. A school district can work with a union. Unions, of course, work with superintendent associations and state associations, and all of these people are dirty. What makes anybody believe that they wouldn't hire a criminal to go kill somebody and then look at that person and say, make it look like a suicide? Again, it's possible that this individual did in fact kill themselves, and if that's the case, I'm sorry about that, but this is also a very dirty business, and it's a government business. And because it's dirty and it's government, which is redundant, some people unfortunately bark up the wrong trees and they don't understand how deep the rabbit hole goes. And then, of course, how all of that mud and that sludge can come right up the rabbit hole and hit somebody hard. So yes, it's a dirty business from that standpoint, but it's also a very unfortunate business in the fact that it wears on a person's mind when you're consistently swinging for the fences against a group of individuals that you know are terrible, and you're trying to use the legal system against them as best as you can. I mean, that's remarkably taxing on the human mind. And again, I don't know if there was anything else going on in the guy's life or not, but either way, eventually you just have to walk away. I fully understand that in certain situations like this, people want to control as much as they can control, but I mean, I applaud his efforts. I really do. I'm not bad-mouthing him by any stretch. He worked very hard. He stood up for his own daughters. He stood up for children that were not his. He was going after who he perceived to be very bad people within this school district, and rightfully so. Again, I'm sure it stretched back even to the mask wearing and the social distancing and the whole COVID lie stuff. I mean, yeah, it was about pornographic books and transgender bathrooms and all of those degenerate dangers as well, but if he did kill himself, suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem, and not being on the battlefield in one form or fashion permanently is certainly not a good thing, because there's lots of ways to fight and there's lots of ways to do things. So I don't know. It seems highly suspicious to me. He didn't seem like an individual who would do such a thing, not in the times that I saw him on the Stu Peters show. He seemed very motivated. He seemed very forthright and committed, without a doubt. But he was also, again, trying to bring a lot of awareness to what was going on in the area, and sometimes that's going to back up on you, certainly when it comes to the corrupt system that is American K-12 education. So again, I'm speculating. I don't know the circumstances, but it's sad nonetheless. So there you go. An unfortunate casualty in the war. I want to move on now to some jab-related things here. A couple of rather large stories, and it all ties right into Sunday's Substack. This first one was from Frontline.news, and it was titled, Israeli Health Minister Lost, quote-unquote, 82% of reports on COVID vaccine side effects. Authorities forced vaccinations on Israeli population, leading to increase in adverse events. It says, let's see, the state comptroller, I'm not going to get the name right, Netanyahu Engelman, revealed last month that the Israeli health minister received 345,200 reports of adverse events following administration of the Pfizer injection. Only 18% of those reports were recorded in the ministry's database. The other 82% were lost, quote-unquote, due to technical errors. It says the health ministry also failed to process an additional 33,000 reports filed by the public regarding side effects due to the limited ability to analyze reports filed anonymously, continued the report. Quote, adding to that, a lack of manpower in the ministry's Department of Epidemiology meant that reports that contained identifying details were also unable to be reviewed and investigated. Interesting. Not to mention the use of the number 33. 33,000 reports. Of all of the numbers and of all of the reports, it has to be 33 again, doesn't it? Of course, they're hiding this because of the high number of deaths, as we know. Not to mention, there were numerous individuals over there in Israel who claimed to be getting the shots when in fact they were getting fake shots. It was being recorded on camera, certain political officials and other people who, of course, didn't want it. And then that needle would just either magically disappear or not even be there in the first place. And then they'd rub their arm like they actually got it and then walk away and put a fake Band-Aid on. And there you go. It goes on here. It says the 18% of reports that were reviewed by the health ministry mostly consisted of mild side effects, such as pain at the injection site or low fever. There were also reports, it says, about more serious side effects that made it to the review stage and were checked by ministry officials. These included approximately 200 reports about changes in vaccinated women's menstrual cycles following the shots. However, Comptroller Engelman found that the ministry did not investigate these reports in a timely manner. Shocking. It said the ministry also reviewed about 275 reports about myocarditis and pericarditis following the injections. Most of the patients in those cases ended up being hospitalized. Rather than criticizing public health officials for failing to investigate the great majority of vaccine injuries, however, Comptroller Engelman's report chastised the health ministry for not doing enough to ensure public trust in the mRNA injections. He specifically reprimanded government officials for not acting sufficiently to combat, quote, anti-vaccination propaganda, and for not having a strategy in place to fight false information, quote unquote, about the vaccine. The article goes on, but I'm going to leave it there. You get the gist of it. These are transhumanists. These are message controllers, evil propagandists of the highest order. They're hiding all of the death information because, according to Anthony Fauci, these shots save lives. Let's not forget that that's his take on things. He, of course, is a complete narcissist and a total psychopath and would even reference Israel. Our friends in Israel didn't seem to have a problem, so why would we have a problem? Because it's the same shot. Well, as it turns out, many Israelis are dead from the shots, and they actually took them. Just like many Japanese are dead from the shots, and they're wondering why their economy is falling apart. And of course, the same thing is happening here, as we know. So again, not only do we have the open admission of deleting documents and deleting statistics and government statistics related, of course, to the shots and the correlation with death and serious illness, but this is where the psychological inoculation continues here. This was from VaticanCatholic.com, and it was also on the National File. And this was titled, just a couple of days ago, Government Tracking Unvaccinated People Going to Doctor and Hospital Due to CDC-Designed Surveillance Program. This is your Internet of Bodies. This is your Internet of Everything right here also. Transhumanist agenda in a nutshell as well. Even though this isn't a implanted method of tracking an individual, it is still a way of tracking an individual by process of elimination and using mathematics, and then a computer system and a database to gather these individuals on some kind of a list. Essentially, they know who's not jabbed. They know that we are out there, which is exactly why, again, the WHO isn't quitting. They're always rewriting their documents and their PowerPoint presentations and everything else to try to do whatever they can to try to change our minds. They, of course, know that they aren't ever going to change our minds, which means, what are they going to have to do in the future? In order to poison us, to get us hooked up to this Internet of Bodies and this Internet of Everything, they have to find another way to poison us. But all of that, again, is kind of in the Substack, but let me go on with this article. It says, quote, the U.S. federal government is tracking people who decided not to get the COVID-19 vaccine injection, according to bombshell federal government records and video exclusively obtained by the National File. According to the shocking video, unvaccinated people are quietly tracked when they go to the doctor's office or to the hospital due to a quiet new program proposed and implemented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Government meeting materials make clear that the new program is designed to, quote, track people who are not immunized or only partially immunized. It goes on, it says a bombshell piece of information was revealed at a September 14th, 15th, 2021 virtual Zoom meeting of the federal government's ICD-10 Coordination and Maintenance Committee, which includes representatives from the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, known as CMS, and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, National Center for Health Statistics. At the meeting, the committee discussed new categories of quote-unquote ICD-10 codes that the CDC's National Center for Health Statistics wanted to create to mark people as unvaccinated for COVID-19, partially vaccinated for COVID-19, and other under-immunized or immunization status, it says, quote-unquote. The coding system was created by the WHO, and doctors are required to use it to categorize different kinds of patients. Again, I'm beating this horse, but it has to be beaten. This right here, again, is your Internet of Bodies, and more specifically, your psychological inoculation. Hospitals are given a directive. They have to follow it without thought, without favor, without question. Don't even bring ethics or morals into it. You just have to follow it, and this is the way that it has to be done no matter what. Well, it's our policy, and it's our procedure, and if you're not following it, then you're being insubordinate, and you're violating your contract, and then you're fired. This right here, again, is the transhumanist agenda. It doesn't all have to be implantable microbes inside of people that shoot a message out to a computer to tell a computer what may or may not really be wrong with a person, or even used as a weapon to remotely turn them off and kill them instantly. It can be something as procedural as paperwork in a computer database or a checkbox in a particular line of questioning that you ask a patient, are you vaccinated for COVID, quote unquote, and if so, how many have you taken, and if not, why not? I mean, it can be all of those methods and something as simple as that, but the point is, you'd better believe they're keeping track, and you'd better believe that this is all coordinated, this is all a giant on purpose, and then they're going to do whatever they can to get these shots in us, or this technology, quote unquote, which is a kill program, inside of people's bodies, with or without their knowledge, and with or without their consent. Toward the end of the article, it says that the CDC implemented the new codes to track unvaccinated people in April of 2022, according to a document published on a CMS federal government website. It said ICD-10 Coordination and Maintenance Committee staffer David Bregland, MD, read from page 194 of a CDC topic packet that was prepared for the meeting. It says the topic packet states, emphasis added, quote, during the current time of the COVID-19 pandemic, immunizations have provided protection for many people, but there is interest in being able to track people who are not immunized or only, it says, partially immunized. At the current time, this is a significant modifiable risk factor for morbidity and mortality, and of interest for clinical reasons, as well as of value for public health. NCHS is proposing creation of codes for unvaccinated for COVID-19, quote unquote, and for partially vaccinated for COVID-19, unquote. It says NCS stands for the National Center for Health Statistics, which is a U.S. federal government division of the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Ladies and gentlemen, they are our enemy. It is that simple, and we need to stay as far away from these people as humanly possible. However, this unfortunately is where the Internet of Bodies and the Internet of Everything will find you, whether you want to be found or not. I include very briefly an example of how they plan on accomplishing that. And this came from the New York Times back on June 2nd. And the article was titled, The Internet's Final Frontier, Remote Amazon Tribes. It says Elon Musk's Starlink has connected an isolated tribe to the outside world and divided it from within. Long story short, they showed up to an Amazon tribe with their Starlink satellite so they could all have internet. gave them all cell phones, and now they're all zombies. That's basically it. The kids are watching porn. The parents are watching movies and porn. No one's talking to each other anymore. And that's what's going on in these hidden Amazonian tribes. They're playing video games. They all have with their heads down staring at their phones when they never used to have them in the first place. It's awful. But there you go. Again, Elon Musk, not our friend. Well, everybody deserves the internet, Shawn, and everybody should have a cell phone and access to information if they want to. It's a tracking device. And the next thing that'll happen is they'll show up with inoculations for these people to take because they'll be brainwashed by the messages that they're receiving from the Internet of Bodies and the Internet of Everything and their cell phones, and before you know it, even remote tribes are being wiped out. As I say in the Substack article for Sunday, I don't know. I honestly don't know if there's a way to escape this. And I'm not trying to, play doom and gloom or anything. I mean, I've worked it out in my head from about as many angles as I possibly can here, and I just don't know if there's avoiding it. Lawsuits, of course, aren't going to do a thing. They tend not to anyway. I'm not saying that certain devices can't be brought down, like 5G towers and whatever, in certain areas. They certainly have. And I had Mark Steele on the show well over a year ago, and he said the same thing. I mean, he's been working very hard in that certain avenue where he lives and areas around him, and he's been successful in court. But most people, again, are finding a very hard foothold in trying to get this message across to people, certainly local politicians, that this is a kill program and that this is not for convenience. And this is not because, well, this is the way that society is evolving and this is the way that we just need to go and this is the direction that it has to be. It isn't the case. It's just not the case. So I really only think that, as I, again, write in the Substack article, I think that the way that we detach ourselves from this transhumanist agenda as much as possible in the Internet of Bodies and the Internet of Everything is by doing whatever we can to not continuously subscribe to these devices, not give them our money, not download all of the apps, certainly not use them for our own health. I think that too is remarkably absurd. I mean, think of this. You have diabetics who are given devices that stick to their bodies on a constant basis to send a signal to a phone application to show them their blood sugar. And then it sets off an alarm on their phone when their blood sugar reaches a particular level to then give themselves the necessary amount of insulin. And people, again, view this as being a convenience. Certainly some diabetics would view that to be the case. But at the exact same time, that right there is the transhumanist agenda also. The combination of the human body and a robot communicating with one another on a constant basis, again, under the guise of being a medical convenience and a preventative measure, without any impact or any thought on the part of the patient as to whether or not the device that is attached to their skin is actually going to be a good thing or a bad thing. Whether or not that's going to have a dermatopic effect on their entire integumentary system. Again, most people wouldn't even think of it. Again, a salesman would just say, oh, there's been no harm, there's been no reports, maybe just a slight rash, but that's about it. Other than that, you'll be fine. Keeping in mind, the device is hooked up to the wireless Internet of Everything, including the very cell phone that the diabetic is carrying with them. There's no way that this isn't having a negative impact on people. But again, subscribing to these kinds of methods is a bad idea, I think. Giving these kinds of methods to people as gifts is a bad idea. iWatches, Bluetooth watches, the wireless headphones, I mean, all of it. Certainly, from a gift-giving standpoint, don't give them as gifts to people. And if you know people who receive them as gifts, I mean, at the very least, you have to assume that if they're using them, then they are unaware of this entire subject, and they're probably a normie and not up to date as to what's really going on in the world. But It wouldn't hurt to tell people that individuals have been hurt by those permanently. I mean, you have to assume that individuals have received brain cancer as a result of the wireless earbuds that endless people walk around with. Those are, again, they're not wired. They are a Bluetooth device that is attached directly to your head while they're also holding onto a cell phone and staring at it. You walk around or drive around a college or university or even a high school campus, you're going to see this with a high level of regularity. It's almost all of them. And it's really sad. Their heads are down, the earbuds are in, and the whole thing. This is part of the problem. The normalization of all of this is the giant issue. So, again, make sure and check out that article if you can, The Internet of Everything. That will be on the americanclassroom.substack.com on Sunday morning. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening as always, and I will catch you on Monday. Peace. Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.